on, everybody? It's George here from NVISION, and we are recording another awesome Brews and Buzzwords podcast. And I have called a long time, somebody I've known for 20 years or so, give or take.
I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah, I think it's been about 20 years. Paul Hicks, who's here to help talk about something I'm really interested in, which is sales leadership, sales enablement, all things that revolve around sales. And his company, SwitchGear, helps train individuals on how to optimize their sales initiatives. So, Paul, first and foremost, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you being on Brews.
Thank you. I know we've been trying for a couple of months to get this organized. And
yeah, well,
we finally got it in the books.
We both live busy lives. We've both got, I've lost count of how many children I have, but I know you've got a lot too. So, appreciate you spending time with us today.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we're going to start off with a bang, man. And this is something that I really like to dive into is, what's the biggest myth about sales leadership you wish more people would stop believing?
Oh,
because there are lots of them.
I think the thing that people, in my experience, don't fully connect the dots on when it comes to sales leadership is the role that they play in change leadership and management.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. Like if we can tie this into marketing. So marketing is going to create a new campaign and they're going to target a new vertical, a new ICP. They create great messaging. They create a funnel of really good leads. If your sales managers aren't fully bought in, they're the ones that the sales reps are taking direction from. Mm-hmm. So sales managers are actually the ones who are going to determine the success of a marketing campaign or a new strategy. Mm-hmm. If they're not fully bought in, you'll hear things like flavor of the month or, like just ride this one out, guys, like give it a month and then we're just going to go back to doing what we've always done and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what people really miss is the fulcrum of change that the sales managers, frontline managers are inside the organization.
So would you say that it is integral that the sales leadership buys into the vision because then the rest will follow kind of thing? Because it sounds to me like the old adage, like, you got to teach a person to fish and they'll catch as many fish or whatever. Like you got to teach these sales leaders on the vision, or are you teaching them on how to sell this thing, or both?
It's all of it.
All of it, okay.
Right? So if they're not involved, oftentimes what happens is strategy gets built in the boardroom.
Yep.
And then it gets poured down into the organization.
Yep.
And the organization is just like, there's a big launch and we think, okay, we launched the change. Let's come back in a couple of weeks and see how we're doing.
Sure.
But a strategy by itself isn't going to change anything. Like we have to change frontline behaviors.
Okay.
And if you need to activate like a sales team, you need that manager to do that. Like you have to be able to really clearly articulate what specifically has to change at the frontline level.
Interesting.
And if managers aren't involved in building the strategy, if they're not the ones who are going to actually help you figure out what's working well today, what isn't working well, what do we need to adapt and adjust? I had one of my friends describe this as you basically leave it to the frontline teams to figure out what adoption looks like.
Yeah.
So there's so much time and energy spent on launching change, but then the day two of turning change into action where the rubber meets the road, that's where things are kind of left to frontline teams to figure out.
Got it.
And then a month later, executives are looking at reports and saying, well, why aren't we generating revenue from this vertical? We missed our target. Yeah. Like what's going on? And then when you actually look into it and you say, well, nothing actually changed. Everybody's doing the same thing they've always done.
It's interesting. So like in terms of the collaboration, because I do agree that, strategies seem to be developed in the boardroom.
Yeah.
How important do you feel collaboration is with the folks in the boardroom and the sales guys on the front line? Like that knowledge sharing and that gap that it tends to exist because we're in our, 41st floor boardroom.
Yeah.
And these guys are on the streets selling.
Yeah.
And these guys, really the value that they bring to the table, in my opinion anyways, is they understand what people are asking. So how important do you feel that synergy is? And do you see there's a big gap there? Like between...
Huge gap.
Yeah?
And it's super important because it's not just what people are asking, it's why people aren't buying.
Interesting. Right.
So,
of course.
Yeah. So when you think about like I remember seeing on LinkedIn once there was this picture of an iceberg and it showed like the top 4%.
Yeah.
And it says, this is what executives see.
Right.
And then it shows like 15% and this is what VPs see. And then 30 and 40 and down to the bottom, you get to the like 95% level. And that's what the front line sees.
Right.
They see everything under the surface.
Right.
And so it's absolutely critical that you get frontline employees involved, not necessarily in building. I think you can build the strategy, like set direction and like, here's where we want to go. That's the what you're going to do. Where you need the frontline adoption and input is on the how you're going to get there. Because there's 12 different ways you could drive revenue in a new vertical or a new ICP, ideal customer profile.
Yep.
But, the getting the frontline team involved in actually designing which one we're going to try first and acknowledging that you're not going to get it right the first time. Yeah. You might figure out 75 or 80% of it, but you're gonna have to tweak and iterate and adjust as you go.
Yeah.
So that's why we're always helping sales teams not build a great strategy or figure out what the actual, like, here, this is exactly what you have to do. We're like, tell us what the strategy is. We'll figure out the first best path forward to achieve that strategy. And then we're going to pilot some things. We're going to try 2 or 3 different things. And whichever one generates the best results, that's when we are going to iterate, scale, and make it a new habit for people.
Yeah, I think that resonates with me. I think because marketing is very much the same. You have your hypothesis and you're
totally,
here's what we're going to do based on a wealth of knowledge and due diligence and research. And then ultimately you got to roll it out to really understand, is this going to actually work, right? So in terms of like, I know you've led and coached and, across all stages of business and different stages of leadership. How have you seen leadership evolve in terms of sales over the past decade or so? Have you seen a big shift?
So 5 years ago when the pandemic happened, that's probably the biggest shift that we've seen in sales leadership in the last 25 or 30 years.
For sure.
Because you had all these teams where you could be in the office together. You're walking around, is the old term of like management by walking around, right? I could walk out, I could see George, I could say hi, like I could tell if something was off. I'd go over and have a chat with them.
Body language,
all that stuff, right? Then we moved into working from home and remote work.
Yeah.
And all of that was lost. And so managers, I'm not dumping on managers. This is just the way that many organizations are set up. What they had to fall back on were metrics, activity and metrics. And so the human side of the connection, the, employee engagement suffered. Quiet quitting was on the rise. And so managers didn't have, literally overnight, like it was, funny enough, it was like March 16th when the pandemic happened. We were supposed to fly to Vancouver to see my brother-in-law, and we literally canceled our flight like the Friday, and the Sunday they were closing airports.
Yeah.
And so the playbook that managers were using to run their business, run their teams, drive performance and engagement literally went obsolete overnight. And now with teams, like you're seeing some teams come back into the office, but most organizations are driving hybrid.
Yeah.
That's been the biggest fundamental shift from a sales leadership standpoint, is people just struggling to figure out, how do I lead, manage, and coach my team in a remote environment?
Yeah. Not only that, I find that was a real unique pivotal point, is where I'm very much an in-person person. I like people in 3D. The 2D thing really kind of got dull and repetitive and boring, and the lack of engagement. I think if you're staring at a screen all day versus this sort of interaction, there's a big difference in what I can do here versus what I can do staring at a screen that I've been staring at for 8 hours, right?
Totally.
So I thought that was fundamentally huge. The other thing I found, not only was it difficult within the organization, but the salesperson selling to the people who were trying to buy, like your customer, right? Yeah. Ultimately, they're also not as engaged. They weren't as engaged. So you had to work to really get that conversation, to excite them, to really understand, what the problem is, what you're there to solve, and keep them engaged in, again, them staring at sometimes even a phone, like you're checking somebody out on a 6-inch screen. Yeah. Right. So really tough as a salesperson to, figured that one out. And those who are really good, they have figured it out on how to do this. But I think we're getting back to this, I think people are really starting to appreciate that doing business in person is a really nice thing. And was
1,000%.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that sentiment come back a little bit. Like people want human connection.
Yeah.
Right? Especially on high ticket things or whatever. It doesn't even have to be, but people want to communicate effectively face to face again.
Yeah.
What's one of the non-negotiable values that you carry as a sales coach and leader that's no matter what the company or the client you're working with? Like this is a non-negotiable value.
It every time it's trust.
Trust.
Like you have to. I don't need a lot of trust to manage somebody.
Yeah.
But for me to coach and lead somebody, trust is your number one currency. If people don't trust you, they won't be coached by you. They won't follow you into a battle.
Yeah.
They'll just hold back. So it's one of the things we focus on in our leadership workshops is how do you people understand the concept of trust, but how do you build trust? How do you recover when trust is broken? We spend a lot of time just talking about that with our management teams.
Yeah, and how absolutely integral is trust in sales? I mean,
it's huge.
It's so huge. Like if you're trying to convince someone to do business with you, they need to know that you got their back, right? And no different than inside an organization. That's how you're going to build the best rapport with that individual or that organization. I do agree. I think trust is absolutely something that I lean on heavily as well. Because it's your name on the line too, right? As a salesperson.
For sure.
Like you just pitched me this thing and it sucks. I trusted you, man. And if you lose that trust, and I don't know, I'd love to hear from your experience. Once trust is lost, would you agree it's pretty hard to get back?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like we spend a lot of time talking about, like when you're building trust, you're basically making deposits into a relationship. And even my wife, Catherine, she's an educator, and they talk to their kids in primary school about how, for every, there's this like equation where it says for every withdrawal of trust, like every time trust is broken, it takes 11 positive interactions to begin to rebuild that trust.
Yeah.
So it's not this 1-to-1 ratio where it's like, I did all these things really, really well, and then I just made this one mistake and trust is broken and it's hard to recover from.
Right.
And you'll appreciate this as a dad. Like I spend tons of time talking to my kids about this.
Yeah.
About how trust impacts not just professional relationships, but personal relationships, and how when you break trust in any relationship, it is really hard to get it back. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like trust for me it's huge. If you struggle with building trust, maintaining trust as a currency inside of a relationship, you're going to really struggle in leadership and in sales and in life in general.
Yeah. Do you think empathy plays an important role as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Empathy, I find, can sometimes be talked about in a very superficial way.
For sure.
And it's almost like it's turned into like a technique, like a sales technique, like empathizing with people. And it's true empathy absolutely is a real superpower. But people's BS detectors are very, very strong when it comes to fake anything, right?
Yeah.
Fake. I'm trying to build trust in a disingenuous way, or I'm displaying empathy because I feel like I should, or it's what I was taught to do, but it doesn't come across real, right?
It's the sleazy car salesman, right? Who's just
totally,
doesn't care what he has to say or do to get the sale, and it's like, that stuff. I think people really can read through these days, right?
For sure.
I read this awesome quote from Chris Voss's book, which I know you've read as well, and he said, the beauty of empathy is that it doesn't demand that you agree with the other person's ideas. And the reason I love that quote so much is that when you're building trust with someone, especially in the sales world, for me as a marketer, when people come to me and they're like, I need this thing to be, to grow sales, revenue, bottom line, top line, whatever. I'm like, no, you don't. That's actually not what you need. Now you could disagree with them and still have a wicked relationship. And I find sometimes that the technique of being honest with somebody and not telling them what they want to hear amplifies that trust and gets it that much closer to like building a true relationship. Because if you don't have that if you don't have that empathy to be like, I know they're wrong and I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong. I'm just going to go along with it. I find in sales, especially, and a lot in marketing, but I apply myself in both worlds. You have fractured that relationship right from the beginning, because the moment you can't deliver on what they thought was going to be the thing that was going to get them to the promised land, you've fractured that relationship.
Yeah. And you won't recover from that.
Yeah.
Or it's very difficult to. And yeah, so like you're bang on with the Chris Voss quote, and it's very much like the challenger model, right? The challenger model is to do exactly what you described. Like you're challenging the way people think about their problem.
Yeah.
You're challenging the way people think about their solution. And one of the things that I find, especially from like a sales rep perspective, is there's a sales reps tend, I want to say sales, people in general tend to be really quick to jump to solutions.
Yeah.
We see a problem, we think we understand the problem, and so we rush to solutions. And one of the ways that I find the best sales reps build trust inside of a customer relationship is they don't do that. They actually help their customer reframe and rethink the problem they're trying to solve. Because oftentimes, and I'm sure you've seen this, executives or senior leaders will say, like, here's the problem I have to solve. And what they're pointing to is a symptom.
Right.
They're not actually pointing to the root cause of the problem.
Right.
And so being able to empathize with where they're at and what they're seeing, but then at the same time open their eyes to what they're maybe not seeing or missing, that's a really effective way to build trust inside that relationship, because you're bringing a new perspective, which is frankly why they hire people like you and me. Like they don't need people to say, yeah, you're right. Like that's exactly it. That's what we should do.
Yeah.
They have tons of people in their office that already do that.
Are ready to do that.
Right. Like they're talking to people like you and me because they're saying, I need fresh eyes. I need a new perspective on this. What have I missed?
Yeah. Have you been like, I know you're very passionate about sales, and everything you put out into the world is wonderful. The one trend I've noticed as of late, as I also follow a lot of sales and those who promote, selling and how to sell and whatnot, but objection handling, and it seems to be like this hot topic right now, and in the variety of ways people are handling objection and training people on how to handle objection is so interesting to me, because it's like it goes to that right to the disingenuous place, as opposed to like the honesty and trust building.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to persuade you no matter what, that what you're saying is wrong to get the sale done. And I'm seeing a lot of that as a trend right now. And I'm like, what is going on here? Yeah. And do you see that as well? Are you seeing that online?
I see it online. It's one of the number one.
You probably see it in person.
It's one of the number one challenges my clients come to me to help them fix. Yeah. Is how do we address objections? And I think about it from two perspectives. There's how do you proactively avoid an objection? Yeah. So, in Chris Voss's book, he talks about walking up to the airline counter. Yeah. And talking to the lady and basically be like, listen, like, you're going to hate me. And he's putting it on the table. He's like, listen, like, you're going to hate me. I have a huge ask. I'm going to be a huge pain in your butt right now. And that just disarms people. Right. Like people like knowing bad news is coming. Yeah. And so like, that's like a way of like proactively avoiding an objection. Right. In terms of handling objections, or it's not even handling, like you don't handle rejections, you respond to them. And I am always encouraging people to respond with curiosity. Yes. Because when somebody gives you an objection, first off, the word objection, I don't think is the right word to be putting out there. Like it's, people have questions and they have concerns. Right. That's it. But they're presented as objections. Right. I'm always, because I'm always selling. Yeah. Like I'm selling my time. Do it for a living. I do it for a living. Yeah. And people will always come to me and say like, oh, like, well, like that price seems really high for what it is that we're trying to do here. And my first response isn't to justify the price. My first response is like, it sounds like you're comparing a couple of different options. Can you just tell me a bit more about what high means? Like, what do you mean by high? And just getting them to expand and then elaborate. And now I'm actually getting into the root cause of what their concerns are. And you're having conversation. Totally. You're just having honest conversation. Totally. For something that they reached out to you for. Yeah. Right? Very different than like cold outreach versus
inbound versus outbound kind of thing. That's what I find I really like with inbound. You came to me,
right,
and I'm going to tell it like it is, right?
Yeah.
Versus me trying to pry and understand your business, because that, I don't know, I see that it's a falling. A lot of people will proclaim that outbound is a brilliant way of doing lead gen, but I'm like, you got to do volume, like massive volume. And do you know how many people you're rubbing the wrong way? You know, so I don't know. I've never been fond of the outbound side. I've always been fond of, you come to me, I'll solve your problems. You know, so, and in many ways, I would say maybe that's a flaw in our agency, because I've never been fond of like cold outreach. I've always been a relationships driven guy, but I know that there are people who claim it's great. What are you seeing that is broken in companies that are still training their salespeople? Like, what training would you say is like that it's outdated or not necessarily relevant to the way we operate today?
That's broken from a training perspective. I would say
specifically for salespeople. Like, is there things you're seeing that are like, man, I would never train a salesperson to.
Okay, here's what I would say.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of, and with the best of intentions, organizations are building these sales playbooks, and they're too long and they're too vague. I was a friend of mine. He's the general manager for a Canadian technology company, and he asked me to kind of just come in and take a look at their sales playbook and just identify a couple of things that they might improve. Two things immediately jumped out at me. First of all, it was 75 pages.
The sales playbook was 75?
And that's not the shortest one I've ever seen.
What?
Like, oh yeah. Like they are, it's a Bible. And you say to a rep, it's like, so here's how we sell. And my initial question to all these people is like, okay, so if I'm a rep in the field, how am I supposed to use this?
Do you mind me asking?
Yeah.
What industry would require 75 pages? Like, are you selling a Boeing 747?
It's complex B2B sales. So, but no, like
Medical?
this isn't, it could be any industry.
Really?
But it's, because there's just,
it blows my mind a little bit.
I think the people who create them might be paid by the page. I don't know what it is, but they're just really long. And then the concepts inside of them tend to be really vague. Like this one that I was reviewing. So out of 75 pages, how many pages would you dedicate to discovery? Like you think about like the sales process, you think about discovery, like understanding customers' problems, like asking great questions, like really getting into the root cause of what it is they need help solving. Just say a 75 page playbook. How many pages would you dedicate to discovery?
Man, I can't, like, I'm having a hard time even thinking about a 75 page playbook, but
it's hard.
I would say that a majority of it would be to do the discovery.
Yeah.
Like to really get an understanding of what the issues are.
Yeah.
Because from there, if I'm in an industry and I've been trained on that industry and I'm passionate, the sale is easy once I identify the problem.
Yeah.
So I would say a bulk of it.
3 pages.
Okay. 3 out of 75.
3 out of 75. Okay. And the biggest concept that they introduced in these 3 pages was the concept of be curious. And I'm looking at, okay, be curious. Like that's not bad advice.
Right.
Like you should be curious during discovery.
Sure.
But then I'm going through and I'm like, so how am I curious?
Right.
And it's simple things like, like the 5 why technique. Like ask the 5 whys.
Okay.
And I'm sitting back going, okay, well that doesn't work for everything.
Right.
And so that I think is when I look at like the training, when I look at what's being put out there, it's not, people aren't thinking about how would a rep apply this inside of a conversation. They're covering off every possible kind of scenario, different personas, all these different things. And then the concepts they're providing are just really vague. And I wouldn't know how to apply it inside of a conversation.
And that's because you're a left brain lunatic.
Right? I am a left brain lunatic. Absolutely. So listen, I love process. It's one of the things that I do really well is like mapping out process and what are the steps and what comes first, second, third. But the process without the how.
Yeah.
Like telling people what to do without giving them the how to do. It's like I said earlier, it's why you have one playbook given to 50 different sales reps and every sales rep is doing their own thing because they're interpreting what it means to be curious.
Right.
Your version of be curious is different from mine.
Yeah, totally.
And that's why there's all this inconsistency.
Yeah. And that's inconsistency is what really breeds, I find, could breed a negative ecosystem to work with it.
Yeah. And going back to the sales manager, like imagine being a sales manager who's managing like 10 reps.
Yeah.
And you've got like 2 of them are superstars, 2 of them are really poor performers, and 6 of them are kind of in the middle. Like, how do you know what the highest performers are doing really, really well? Like, how do you find best practices if you don't have a map
right
to start from?
Sure.
And so that's one of the things that we help our clients do is like build the map. And we don't build, like, I'm not a fan of scripts. Like, you don't give people a script to do for like sales, because sales is art and science, and like, you know, you have to be able to adapt. But at least know what the steps are you're looking for.
Right.
Inside of a discovery conversation.
So more of a guide.
Yeah.
And then let it kind of organically manifest into whatever.
Yeah. Like we'll give people the steps, and we'll give people the starting point of like the words. Like there's here are the foundational questions. Here's the order you ask them in. And then you have to kind of use your intuition. Yeah. We get you started essentially.
Yep.
And then you have to kind of go and like be curious naturally. And, you know, you said this over here. I'm curious how that connects to this over here.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that? Like those types of things. And that's what gets people.
I love that. That's kind of what we do too. That we have like, here's a foundation to start.
Yep.
Everything else you got to kind of, you know, a good salespeople will be able to figure out. Right.
Totally.
Okay. What's working right now that most salespeople are overlooking?
What is working right now is the people who are not falling into the AI automation, scale it kind of mindset.
Yeah.
I think people are falling into this trap of confusing efficiency for effectiveness, and efficiency doesn't always equal effectiveness. And so I think the people who are picking up the phone, the people who are sending really good emails to people, you know, you had Andrew on this morning, and I spent some time chatting with him. And one of the things that we were talking about from a cold outreach perspective is just validating a problem, validating an idea. If I call somebody up and it's like, it's clearly a sales call, and I'm trying to get into your calendar so I can pitch you on this product, and that has like a 1.5%-3% conversion rate.
Right.
It's amazing how, because I use this myself. If I send an email to somebody and say, "Hey, George, I'm seeing this in the marketing space. It feels like it's really impacting agency's ability to do X, Y, and Z. I'd love to just kind of hear your opinion on it."
Yeah. Well, it makes it relatable. Like if
I understand you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm bringing a perspective.
Yeah.
I'm able to articulate what I'm seeing in the market. Like I'm demonstrating that I have some value to add.
Yeah.
And then like most people will engage with that.
Yeah.
Like 60, 70%. Like it's crazy how like in even just the language of like, I'd love to hear your opinion. Yeah. People love sharing their opinion.
Of course they do.
So I helped Andrew with that like a week and a half ago, and it's having great impact.
So interestingly enough, speaking of Andrew, and you know, maybe Andrew, if you are watching this, just turn your microphone and speakers off for a second. But you said you were getting tired of AI, and in the context of, you know, where it's adding value to sales, because I'm tired of it. I get pitched every single day on how to get 100 leads in, you know, with AI and this bot and this thing. It's like, where's the genuinity in that, in building? Like, I love relationships. Yeah. You know, and I think there is a place for AI, but
Totally.
But I think in sales, it's depending on what you're selling. Maybe if I'm selling a T-shirt and it doesn't matter who I am.
Yep.
There's no name. There's no brand. There's no, like, it's just commodity.
Yep.
Sure. But I want to be, I want to build that relationship, and AI is not the thing that's going to do that for me.
I'm with you 1,000%. I think I think where the confusion or the disconnect is people think about AI as a way to automate and streamline the mundane, repeatable tasks, which it is, like it should be. And I think that there's places where it can play a really important role. The definition of mundane and repeatable task is where I think people are getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Like when has it ever been that writing an email to a customer is a mundane, repeatable task?
Yeah.
Like sending an email to somebody that's written by AI that doesn't have that personal connection,
Context, nuance,
all of that.
history.
Like that's where people are, I think, falling down.
Yeah.
Like to have AI, like Salesforce has it built into their CRM, where it'll say things like simple notification stuff. You know, you haven't talked to so and so in so long, or you based on your activity for the last 4 weeks with this particular account, we recommend this next step.
Yeah.
That's the what to do.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like I'm good with AI helping with that stuff.
Yeah.
The how to do it.
Right.
That's where I have a real allergic reaction to, like, for AI to write the email. Here's the email you should send to George and 75 other heads of agencies. It's like that's where AI falls apart very, very quickly.
Yeah, and Gemini just introduced, like Google Suite just introduced their Gemini AI into like G Suite and Gmail. So now you can just hit a button and it'll write it for you, and you can just hit send, and it's like, where's the personality? Where's the nuance? Like there's no connection there anymore. Now you're starting to lose connection with the individual because you don't even have the care to spend 5 minutes to draft this email that could truthfully could be the trigger between them picking up the phone and calling you and them saying bland, boring, see ya.
Yeah, and your point's a really good one around, depending on what it is you're selling and the volume with which you're selling it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do have to automate things just from a scale perspective.
Sure.
But the best reps that I work with, they'll receive an email from the customer, they pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And they'll text them or they'll call them, and it's they'll turn simple emails into 20-minute conversations that builds that connection and relationship.
For sure, man. And I love that. It's kind of my go-to as well. I'm still preaching, pick up the phone,
100%.
Make a call.
Yeah.
People love to hear from people, right? And it's when you do, and it's with genuine interest to be like, hey, you sent me this thing. Just wanted to clarify, be easier to just have a 5-minute call than me spin an email for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back and forth 35 times, right?
Totally.
Like, just pick up the phone. So you've got 3 kids at home.
I do.
I've got 4.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, what's one parenting lesson that made you a better leader at work?
It almost feels like it's the other way around. Like lessons I learned at work that help me become a better parent.
Yeah. That happens too.
Yeah. From the parenting side, it's funny. I wrote a LinkedIn post about this a couple of weeks ago about how I think one of the hardest things to do as a parent is to allow your children to feel the pain of natural consequences.
I read that one. That hit home with me too, because I totally agree with you.
Yeah. I think it's harder in a professional setting because leaders are always under pressure to hit goals and hit target and achieve these
KPI overload.
Totally. And so it's probably just that balancing act. Like when as a leader can you afford to let somebody kind of dig their heels in and go down a path and experience some setbacks, versus when do you have to step in and say, listen, like, we've gone down this path before. We know how this movie plays out.
Yeah.
We need to do something different. And that goes back to how we started this whole conversation. Like, one of the biggest challenges for things that's missed from a sales leadership standpoint is their number one job is to drive change.
Yeah.
Like, drive behavior change and, understand the rules and the formulas that go into motivating people to try new things. Like there's a change equation. It's called the Beckert-Harris change equation.
Okay.
And it's D times V times F must be greater than R.
Okay. Explain.
R is resistance.
Okay.
Every change, no matter what it is going to be met with some resistance.
Okay.
And the bigger the change, the bigger the resistance. Like, you think about somebody who's trying to quit smoking.
Sure.
That's a huge change.
Sure.
So on that side, you have this like greater than sign. You got the R. On the other side of the equation, you have D times V times F. So D is dissatisfaction with the current state.
Okay.
Are you dissatisfied with where you are today? V is, can you create a compelling vision of where we could get to tomorrow?
Okay.
And then F is, what are the first steps we're going to take to go from where we are to where we want to be.
Okay.
It's a really interesting equation because, as we know from grade 4 math, anything times 0 equals 0.
Yes.
So you could have all kinds of vision and you could have amazing first steps mapped out. But if you have 0 dissat with where you are today, that whole side of the equation is 0, and 0 will never be greater than the R.
Right.
And so that's oftentimes, like when we talk about driving change inside organizations, that's one of the first equations we're teaching people is, you really have to create the dissat. But people tend to jump to vision and first steps, and they ignore, if I'm not dissatisfied with where I am today, why would I change?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's great. And I do like giving people the opportunity to gracefully fail, because you'll learn a lot from that too. Like, I think
Totally.
Giving people some runway to say, okay, you want to try this and the potential consequence could be this, but I'm okay with it. And giving people that confidence that they're allowed to explore and experiment to an extent, right?
Can I give you two
please.
Right? So if a leader feels like their team or rep is going down a not ideal path, there's 2 questions that I encourage people to ask. So number 1 is, like, what are all the different ways we could tackle this problem?
Right.
And just option brainstorming.
Yep.
Because there's never one way to do things.
Yep.
You might come up with like 4 or 5 different ones.
Yeah.
And then you can then have a good conversation around, like, if we pick 2 of these,
Yep.
don't restrict yourself to 1. If you pick 2 of these, which 2 would we go with?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, what are the pros and cons, the potential pros and cons?
Yeah.
And just getting people to, because oftentimes people, when they're deciding what path to take, they'll just focus on the positive.
Yep.
This is going to work because X, Y, Z. I agree. I think you're totally right. Like, if those 3 things are true, this is going to work great.
Let's hope so. Right.
What are the things that we're not, like, what are the things that might get in the way?
Right.
What are the potential cons of this approach? Yeah. And so that just expands the conversation and can get people out of the, I'm going down this path.
Yeah, I really like the pros and cons approach. And to your first point, the Dan Martell writes a lot about the 1-3-1 rule: 1 problem, 3 solutions,
Yep.
1 outcome.
Yep.
Right, which is also a neat approach to, like, think about different ways you can address the problem facing you.
Totally.
All right, one last question.
Yeah.
And I know you're a big cook, right? You like to cook.
I love to cook. Yeah.
So this is kind of a play on that. But if sales were a dish, man, what would it be and why?
Oh my God! If sales were a dish. If sales were okay, so it's got to be something that is part art and part science. I'm not a good baker.
Okay.
Like I love to cook, and I frustrate my wife a little bit because she'll go into the kitchen and say, like, we have nothing to eat for dinner. What are we going to do? I'll open up the fridge and the pantry and I'll kind of whip something up, and she's like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
Cooking food, you can experiment and you can do things a little different, right? But I feel like sales would be more like baking.
Okay.
Because baking, like, you have to follow the recipe.
I see where you're going with this. I get you.
Right? Like, there's a recipe, and like that's the science of sales.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're baking a cake, you get to decide, is this like a 1-layer cake, a 2-layer cake? How am I going to decorate it? Like, you watch those baking competitions and like the crazy concoctions they make. They're following a recipe, but then they're putting their own personal spin on it.
Yeah.
So I think if I had to equate sales to something, I would say it's that baking combination of science, follow the recipe, don't deviate too far from that.
Yeah.
But then you have to put your own personal spin and style to it to make it your own.
I like that a lot. And I like cheesecake too, if anybody's watching. Give me cheesecake. That's awesome, Paul. Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on here, sharing your knowledge. How do people get a hold of you if they're interested in, bettering themselves as sales or their organizations? Where do they get a hold of you? Yeah,
the easiest way, they can go to the SwitchGear website, switchgear.ca. They can send me an email to paul@switchgear.ca. My LinkedIn page, my phone number's on there. People can text me.
Right on.
If people want to get a hold of me, they can find me.
Awesome. And I would encourage you to get a hold of Paul because he shares some brilliant stuff on his LinkedIn profile. So follow him. Check out SwitchGear if you guys are looking for sales leadership, better your sales processes. I want to personally thank you for coming here. I haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah, man.
And I'm glad we got to make this happen. So appreciate it. And hopefully we can keep this conversations going because sales is endless. We can talk for hours and hours and hours about sales. So thank you everybody for watching. Have a wicked day. And reach out to Paul if you feel he can help you with your sales stuff. See ya. Thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of it, please like, subscribe, or share it with your friends.